This is United We Strike Radio on the International Community Radio Network. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why. UnitedWeStrike.com Radio.
Welcome back, folks, to April 15th and the first day of the strike. The international strike, we're calling for global peaceful resistance in the form of noncompliance. Don't buy, don't comply, and ask why. Don't buy anything from multinational corporations or anything you haven't researched for yourself. Don't comply by keeping your money in institutions that deal in derivatives, and ask why. Why are we here, and what are you doing about it? Are you part of the solution or problem? Well, right here at United We Strike, we are part of the solution. And we have guests to you now coming from the UK. We have Dave Derby, who is the editor of The Sovereign Independent. Welcome to the program, Dave.
Thank you very much for having me, Karen.
Well, thank you, and I really want to take a minute here to thank Neil for helping us so much here in the background. So, Neil, here's a shout-out. We couldn't have done this without you. And now we have Scott Tips, who is also going to be on with you. Scott, are you there?
I sure am, Karen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Scott. You're the head of the National Health Federation, and now I am going to turn the interview over to you, and I want to thank you both for being part of the marathon and United We Strike.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, there's an awful lot going on in Ireland at the moment. Indeed, there is across Europe. We've got, obviously, Walter's been talking about the fluoride issue in Ireland, and there are a number of organisations which are actually fighting to have the fluoride removed from our drinking water, not least of which is NHF Ireland. NHF Ireland were recently formed within the last couple of years as really a branch of the National Health Federation, of which Scott Tips is the chairman of. So basically, Scott, I'd like to just introduce you and also to ask you a few questions, not only regarding fluoride, obviously Walter's covered much of that, but regarding certain other issues which are going to be affecting us in the coming weeks and the coming months. But first of all, could you just, for those who are not familiar with yourself and with the National Health Federation, if you could just spend a couple of minutes just explaining who you are and what you do and what you're all about.
Sure, Dave. Thanks. The National Health Federation is actually the world's oldest health freedom organization for consumers. We've been around for more than 56 years now, and it started in Southern California and spread from there to the rest of the states, Canada, Europe, the UK, of course, Ireland, and the like. And we've been very keen on issues like anti-water fluoridation, that is, pro-clean water, pure water, and we've been fighting it since before almost anyone else really was. And we were quite successful in getting that out of the water supplies in the U.S. in many communities, unfortunately not all communities, but many. And we have also been involved in the fight to give the right to people to refuse to take vaccinations if they want, to not be, shall we say, poisoned by vaccines, especially the large number that are occurring these days. We also are involved in the rights for individuals, and still are, for the rights for individuals to take whatever supplements and vitamins and minerals they wish to take, and have been quite active on that front. And part and parcel of that has been using our lobbyist in Washington, D.C. to lobby for pro-health freedom bills, and to avoid and to oppose those bills that would suppress or limit the rights of the individuals to exercise their rights to consume what they want. But part of this has gone into the Codex Alimentarius, and we received the right. We asked for and got it. I think someone was asleep at the wheel that day, and got the right to attend as an accredited organization the Codex meetings, and we've been making good use of that to push our pro-health freedom agenda at those meetings. And I just got back from 2 meetings last month, one in China and one in Holland, on those very issues.
So you're really there in the middle of it, Scott, in the den of vipers, I suppose, where you're actually.
The den of vipers. Yes.
for want of a better expression. But obviously for the last few years, many of us in the truth community have been trying to wake people up to Codex Alimentarius. Indeed, you've written an excellent book about it. And that's been going quite well in this country and in Ireland. It's actually in Ireland that I'm based. Codex Alimentarius, obviously we've been explaining to people in health food shops and what have you, herbal practitioners and what have you, that this is going to have massive impact on their lives, on their careers, and the health of the nation. 2 or 3 years ago, I mean, personally, I found that many people were, basically they hadn't heard of it, or, obviously due to the mainstream media, they hadn't heard of it. And, many people really weren't interested in what we were saying. And we were trying to explain that eventually under EU law and EU directives, much of what that we rely on as far as herbal medicinal products and food supplements are going to be either banned or they're going to be reduced to the tiniest amounts possible. Now, it seems now we have the traditional herbal medicinal products directive, which is going to be coming into full force EU-wide come April the 30th, I think. So it's all coming to a head now, as we predicted. How would you feel about that, Scott? Well, it seems that it's a no-win situation because this is a directive which is going into force. What can we do about it? What are your thoughts on the traditional herbal medicinal products directive?
Well, that particular directive is a huge danger. I don't want to minimize it because it is a huge danger. It's not quite the danger that some people have magnified it to be, and I'll tell you why. Because it still allows a lot of these products to go through licensed herbalists and the like. I'm not saying that's an excuse. I think they should be freely available, but they won't all disappear from the shelves. Again, though, our position at NHF is that individual is supreme, and the individual should have the right to buy and for his or her own consumption whatever herbs or supplements or nutrients they wish to buy and consume. So there's no excuse for this, but it won't result in a wholesale disappearance on May 1st of all herbs from the marketplace. It'll just make it more difficult for the consumers to get the herbs they want. It will make them more expensive. It will stifle, most and foremost, it'll stifle free speech on these herbs, so you won't know what they're for, because some of these herbs that won't be available as an herb, that is, as a medicinal herb, can still be sold as a food herb. So you just can't say anything about it, which is ridiculous. The consumer needs to have the right to be informed. So it's a huge problem, and it's one that needs to be addressed. So what can we do about it? Well, we kind of live in the Soviet Politburo these days in the EU, which is, the difference between the EU Commission, the European Commission, and the Soviet Politburo is very minimal. They just make these arbitrary decisions, and they're the real force in the EU. So it's really tough to get them to change from what they're doing, especially with this mentality, this top-down elitist mentality that wants to tell everyone what they can do, how they can eat, and the like. So we've tried this approach with petitions. We've tried the approach with the members of the European Parliament, because as you know, in the UK, the Parliament there has really lost all its effective power, except maybe to decide they want to go into Libya and bomb Libya. But other than that, they've pretty much lost their powers. So,
well, it looks like we may have.
Sorry for that. We're just trying to get Scott back now.
Okay. Until he gets Scott back, basically the traditional herbal medicinal products directive and the food supplements directive are directives, EU directives, which are coming into full force at the end of April. The food supplements directive, I'm not too sure whether that's actually August. I wanted to ask Scott about that, and hopefully we can get him back. If you visit a website which is thmpd.eu, you will actually be able to see the EU's own official website about this directive. And to be quite honest, there's no good way of them to be able to flower this over, because what they actually state on the website is that from April the 30th, all herbal products will be illegal unless you, if you're a corporation, unless you purchase a license. Now, this license can cost anywhere between 50 and 100,000 euros per herb. This is to actually license a herb to manufacture and to sell as a medicinal product. Not only that, they actually make it so that in order for you to even just find out about the steps you have to take, the process that you need to take, and the forms that you need in order to apply for this license, that you need to buy a book off of them. This booklet is a booklet. It's about half an inch thick. That booklet costs £250. So they're actually scamming you and fleecing you in every way that they can. And from my standpoint, it seems that they're making it absolutely impossible for anyone to actually license these herbs unless you are a large corporation and you have the money to do it. So basically, this is very, very dangerous, and it's reassuring listening to Scott say that these herbs may still be available, whereas you can still grow the herbs, you can buy the herbs as long as they're not marketed as for medicinal purposes. Okay, so again, as Scott says, whereas now you can go into a health food shop, you can go into a herbal practitioner's, you can buy herbal medicinal products, and it will tell you what those products will do, what ailments or illnesses they'll help. We won't have that anymore. So in that way, it can be very, very dangerous. But as it seems, at least we may still be able to grow the herbs. If you take herbs on a regular basis for different ailments, you will still have the option to be able to grow them at the moment. But I've got no doubt in the future that they'll make that illegal as well. You have the Food Supplements Directive, which is going to be coming into force very soon as well. And this is where the vitamin C and vitamin D and essential vitamins, and I hope Scott can embellish on this if we can get him back, those essential vitamins will be reduced to a very, very minimum dose, which will do you no good whatsoever. So give it another few years, give it a generation, we're going to have a very, very unhealthy population of people. And this seems to be the agenda.
Doesn't it, though, Dave? I'm taking the liberty of popping in here with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when people really start to pay attention and they look around everywhere that we have access to healthy items, they seem to be taken away. Isn't that the case?
Isn't it amazing how the most unhealthy of substances they're forcing upon us, like fluoride, like aspartame? Okay, these things, as we all know, how damaging they are, and anything good, anything healthy, they're taking away. So you can very, very clearly see a very, very strong agenda going on there. This is no accident.
No, it is not an accident. And when you look at the UN's own mandate in their Global Biodiversity Assessment Report, they talk about wanting to reduce the population to about 500 million people. That should be so obvious to everyone when you think about all the ways they're killing us off. Not only do we have these toxins already in our food, but what do you think about this whole meltdown with Fukushima?
Well, isn't this something as well, which, again, I would have liked to speak to Scott about, because we are actually getting some very, very conflicting information as to what's going on there, because there's a lot of secrecy going on, isn't there? And there seems to be a lot of misinformation and disinformation. And again, people are left in confusion. They're playing down the effects, and and to a large extent, certain people are even saying that this radioactivity is beneficial for us. I mean, how crazy is that?
I know.
We're told to keep out of the sun. And yet, because it's dangerous, the sun's natural rays, and yet we're told that nuclear fallout is actually good for us. It's a crazy world. It's a topsy-turvy world.
It is a topsy-turvy world, and I'm sure that radiation will be also soon touted as having no effect on global warming and no effect on the rest of our crops. And have you heard any of Lorraine Moret's views on what's happening in Fukushima?
I haven't really, to be quite honest.
Well, she is thinking that it's actually a kind of a nuclear tectonic war, and that all the chemicals that they put in the sky are used by HAARP to manipulate the weather. We do know that Nikola Tesla developed HAARP back in the 1930s, and it's been secreted away by the governments. And even if only 50% of what she says is true, it's just off the charts, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I mean, there's so much going on. It's absolutely overwhelming what the chemtrails that we're seeing and everything else, and you do wonder, you know, what the integration is, or what the synergy is with the likes of HAARP and what have you. You know, a friend of mine recently said to me, who used to work for the military, that there's a big possibility that what they're using actually in the chemtrails, for instance, you know, basically are going to land on the ground, and basically they're, you know, what they do, they're going to use it for actually profiling the Earth, you know, in anticipation of World War III. Now, this comes from somebody that actually used to chemtrail, and you know, this is what he was told what it was for. So you don't know, do you? You know, again. Over many things, we get conflicting information and conflicting evidence. So it's very, very difficult, really, to sort of like put a finger on it and say this is what they're doing, or that's what they're doing. And I do really think that confusion is built in to it, so that we really don't know what's going on. But I do believe there's a lot of synergy. I do believe that HAARP, in conjunction with chemtrails and certain other things, will be working together against us. That's the feeling that I get.
It is just monumental.
Another thing is interesting. Who decided to build these nuclear power stations on a fault line? You know, they must have.
Right.
Yeah, they must have done some research in the area. They must have done excavation or what have you to know that there's a fault line there, and yet they build a nuclear power station on it. You know, what's all that about?
It's certainly, yeah. It's very interesting when you look at that. When you look at their plans for depopulation. When you look at the eugenics that went on during World War II, and the fact that we have Nazi scientists who were brought over to the United States. Aha, Scott is back. Welcome back, Scott. I will move out then and let you finish your interview with Dave. Thank you for your patience, folks. These are just live radio. Go to it, Scott.
Hello, you. Scott. Yes, hi, Dave. Yeah, we got cut off somehow. I was talking, and next thing I knew, there was nothing there. So where do we pick up?
Yeah, well, basically, we were talking about the Herbal Medicinal Products Directive.
Right.
And basically, you were talking about the fact that although that directive is coming into full force, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to be able to obtain or grow the herbs that we need. But the fact that we may not be able to get information for it as we can at the moment from herbal practitioners and health food shops that stock it. Maybe you could carry on from there.
Yes, it's more a factor that it's going to increase the actual purchase prices of the items. It will increase the communication costs. It will make it in general more difficult to get them. And yes, some will disappear. There's no doubt about it. The ones that will not be cost effective to sell anymore, they will be either disappeared or just extremely difficult to get unless you go to the States or something of that sort. So basically, it's not the end of the world, but it's pretty much as close as you can get without it being the end of the world. And they've been quite devilishly clever about how they've gone about doing this. So I would say that it's obviously something to be opposed, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just another brick in the wall that they are building around our health that we need to demolish so that we can have the freedom that we deserve to have.
Absolutely, because it's God-given freedom, isn't it? You know, these are fruits of the earth. We've had them for thousands of years. They've been proven and tested by many, many cultures for literally thousands of years. And yet you have man-made government coming along, and they've decided they know best, and they're taking it off. And a lot of people are, you know, are feeling extremely angry about this, because what right do they have to make that decision for us? We also have we also have in the very near future the Food Supplements Directive. Now, it's not altogether clear whether the Food Supplements Directive is going to be coming into full force at the same time as the Traditional Herb and Medicinal Products Directive, or around about August time. Could you maybe embellish on that a little bit for me, please, Scott?
Right. Well, technically, the directive is already in effect. The Food Supplements Directive is already in effect. That's the one that took effect at the end of 2009, but which some people who didn't know better confused with Codex coming into effect, as they put it. But they were actually two very different things, and Codex has not come into effect. Rather, it's been the EU's Food Supplements Directive. But having said that, because EFSA, the European Food Safety Agency or Authority, is so far behind in its work in terms of reviewing these dossiers, and because some of the individual nation countries are so far behind in terms of working on the dossiers, we're looking at a situation where they haven't been able to fully implement it. So it will take more time. And there will be more resistance to this. And frankly, I think there are things that we could do anyway. I think people could concentrate on Norway, for example, and as anti-supplement as it is, it's a small country with a few number of people, and if enough effort were focused on one area by all the health freedom activists, who knows, maybe we could change the laws and Norway would become an oasis within the European continent for people to purchase good, cheap, and safe vitamin supplements from. So there are a number of things that can be done, but basically what's happening is it's driving a lot of the good products underground, increasing their costs even more dramatically, and all for no effect. The consumer's health will suffer.
Right, and from what I understand as well, Robert Verkerk is basically heading a group who's going to attempt to take this to the European Court of Human Rights, I think. Do you know much about that? Do you have any comment to make on that, Scott?
Yeah, actually, it's something we've supported in the past. When A&H brought its first legal challenge, the National Health Federation gave money, and we gave publicity, and we pushed it ourselves as well. They were in the driver's seat there, of course, as they should have been, but we were behind them 100% the entire way. I even went and attended the oral arguments in the European Court of Justice there in Luxembourg, and saw the excellent job that the attorneys had done there. And they did do an excellent job. It didn't get the decision that we wanted. It wasn't a total loss, but it wasn't the decision that we wanted. And of course, with any new challenge, we wish them the best and hope it'll prevail and bring us all more freedom. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, so just looking at the time here now, Scott, I think we need to start winding down a little bit now because we're getting close to the to the next guest. But just as a last thought, what would be possibly the last word that you could give us, of encouragement or whatever? What would you like to say to the audience, really as a last comment?
Well, I think the main thing is for people to know to reach out to others with similar views or who are disposed towards similar views, because we've got to build a good network to have an effect here. Individual actions separated by time and space just won't work. We need to have concerted action, work together, and be vocal. Anyone listening needs to be persistently vocal about this, not just say it one time or put something on Facebook or whatever it is, but do active work. And I know it's easy to say and it's harder to do, but people need to reach out and get the message out. That's really the bottom line. And then from the education, will come the action that will turn this around.
Well, that's absolutely perfect, Scott, and I can say myself, as an activist and as a member of SovereignIndependent.com and also NHFIreland.com, we've been working as a group, and we've seen other groups forming, and we are really making waves now, and we really are rustling some feathers. Scott Tipps of the National Health Federation, we thank you very, very much for coming on and explaining what you have for us, and we hope to speak to you very, very soon.
You're listening to UnitedWeStrike.com radio. Don't buy, don't comply. Ask why. UnitedWeStrike.com radio.